In 1965, at a moment when American television was quietly redefining itself, Green Acres arrived not as a simple rural comedy, but as a carefully constructed satire disguised in charm. On the surface, it appeared to be a light-hearted story about a wealthy New York lawyer who abandoned city life for a rundown farm. Beneath that premise, however, lay a sharp, almost subversive commentary on modern life, tradition, and the illusion of progress. The series emerged during a period when audiences were being pulled between two competing visions of America. Urban sophistication was celebrated as the future, while rural life was often portrayed as outdated or quaint. Green Acres inverted this assumption. Instead of mocking the countryside outright, it used absurdity to question whether so-called modernity was truly superior. The humor did not simply come from country folk behaving strangely, but from the realization that logic itself seemed to dissolve once it was removed from its familiar environment. Oliver Wendell Douglas, the central figure, embodies this contradiction. A man trained in law, order, and rational thinking, he willingly chooses chaos. His decision to leave Manhattan for Hooterville is not driven by necessity, but by an idealized dream of authenticity. This choice immediately places him at odds with both the world he leaves behind and the one he enters. The comedy grows from this tension, but so does the show's deeper meaning. Lisa Douglas, his wife, is often misunderstood as merely eccentric or naive. In truth, she represents something far more intriguing. Her attachment to glamour, elegance, and imagination acts as a quiet rebellion against the farm's harsh realities. She does not adapt by surrendering her identity, she reshapes her surroundings to fit it. Her elaborate outfits, her theatrical manner, and her refusal to conform create a surreal contrast that becomes central to the show's visual and emotional texture. What made Green Acres unusual even among contemporary sitcoms was its deliberate rejection of realism. The town of Hooterville operates under its own internal logic, one where cause and effect are optional. Characters respond to events with calm indifference, even when situations defy common sense. This was not accidental. The writers intentionally constructed a world where rational expectations fail, turning Oliver's frustration into a mirror for the audience's assumptions. The supporting characters were not written as caricatures of ignorance, but as figures entirely comfortable within their own worldview. Their calm certainty stands in stark contrast to Oliver's constant agitation. This reversal is crucial. The so-called outsider is not the farmer, but the educated professional who cannot accept that reality does not behave as he expects. The laughter comes not from superiority but from recognition. Production choices reinforced this surreal tone. Scenes were often staged with a theatrical stillness, allowing absurd dialogue to unfold without visual distraction. Long pauses, stiff reactions, and deliberate pacing gave the humor room to breathe. Unlike faster-paced comedies, Green Acres trusted silence as much as dialogue, understanding that timing was inseparable from meaning. The show's visual design also played a subtle role. The farm, far from being romanticized, is presented as stubbornly impractical. Equipment malfunctions, animals behave unpredictably, and basic tasks become monumental struggles. Yet this environment is never portrayed as hostile. Instead, it feels indifferent, almost amused by human effort. This quiet indifference gives the series a philosophical undercurrent rarely acknowledged. Music, too, contributed to the show's distinctive identity. The theme song, cheerful on the surface, carries an ironic undertone. Its upbeat melody contrasts with the reality Oliver faces, reinforcing the idea that optimism often ignores complexity. The lyrics themselves suggest enthusiasm, yet the narrative consistently undermines that promise, creating a gentle tension between expectation and experience. Behind the scenes, Green Acres was shaped by creators who understood television as a medium capable of experimentation. Rather than chasing realism or emotional sentimentality, they leaned into abstraction. Breaking the fourth wall, bending narrative rules, and allowing characters to acknowledge the absurdity of their world were deliberate strategies. These choices placed the series closer to theatrical farce than conventional sitcom structure. The timing of the show's debut was significant. It arrived during a broader movement sometimes referred to as the rural comedy wave, yet it stood apart even within that context. While other series emphasized nostalgia or simplicity, Green Acres embraced contradiction. It suggested that both urban and rural ideals were flawed, and that meaning could not be found by geography alone. Audience reception reflected this complexity. Some viewers initially struggled with its unconventional logic, while others recognized its originality immediately. Over time, the series found a loyal following that appreciated its intelligence beneath the humor. It was a show that did not ask to be believed, only observed. What often goes unnoticed is how quietly the series addressed themes of identity and fulfillment. Oliver's struggle is not merely about farming, it is about control. He believes that changing his environment will grant him clarity and purpose. Instead, he discovers that meaning resists planning. Lisa, by contrast, seems content precisely because she never demands coherence from the world. She adapts through imagination rather than resistance. This contrast creates an emotional rhythm that sustains the series beyond its jokes. Beneath the laughter lies a meditation on acceptance. The farm does not transform Oliver into a better man, nor does the city reclaim him. He remains caught between ideals, illustrating a universal discomfort with transitions that promise fulfillment but deliver uncertainty. The humor of Green Acres ages well because it is rooted in character rather than topical reference. Its absurdity is not tied to fashion or trends, but to human expectation itself. The frustration of plans gone wrong, of logic failing to persuade, remains timeless. The show's refusal to resolve these tensions neatly is part of its lasting appeal. Viewed today, the series feels less like a relic and more like a quiet experiment that succeeded precisely because it did not explain itself. It trusted its audience to recognize the comedy in contradiction and the truth in nonsense. That trust is rare, and it gives Green Acres a dignity that transcends its genre. What begins as a simple relocation story gradually reveals itself as something more reflective. It asks whether progress is truly forward motion, or simply movement disguised as improvement. It wonders whether sophistication offers answers or merely new complications. These questions linger beneath every episode, carried gently by humor rather than insistence. In this way, Green Acres becomes more than a sitcom. It becomes a portrait of a society caught between certainty and change, told through the lens of exaggerated simplicity. Its charm lies not in resolution, but in its willingness to remain unresolved, inviting the viewer to laugh, reflect, and perhaps recognize something familiar in its gentle absurdity. As the series settled into its rhythm, Green Acres became increasingly confident in its refusal to behave like a conventional sitcom. Rather than building toward lessons or resolutions, episodes often ended exactly where they began, with confusion unresolved and logic defeated. This circularity was not a flaw but a statement. Life in Hooterville did not progress according to effort or intention. It simply continued, indifferent to ambition and immune to reform. Oliver's struggle deepened as he attempted, episode after episode, to impose order on a world that neither required nor welcomed it. His legal training, his sense of civic structure, and his belief in procedure all failed spectacularly. Contracts meant nothing, rules were optional, and authority dissolved the moment it was asserted. The comedy was not in his failure alone, but in the quiet suggestion that structure itself might be an illusion once removed from the environment that supports it. The people of Hooterville never appear confused by their own behavior. They are consistent, confident, and remarkably calm. This calmness is essential. If they were frantic or foolish, the joke would collapse. Instead, their certainty exposes Oliver's agitation as the true anomaly. The town does not resist change aggressively, it simply ignores it. This passive resistance gives the series a philosophical edge that often goes unnoticed beneath the humor. Lisa Douglas continues to function as the show's most quietly radical presence. While Oliver battles reality, Lisa reshapes it through imagination. She approaches farm life not as something to master, but as a stage upon which she can perform. Her refusal to abandon elegance is not vanity, but self-preservation. She survives by refusing to accept that environment must dictate identity. In this sense, she is the most adaptable character of all. The relationship between Oliver and Lisa is built on contrast rather than conflict. They are rarely hostile to one another, yet they occupy entirely different realities. Oliver believes fulfillment comes from purpose and discipline. Lisa believes it comes from beauty and expression. Neither is portrayed as entirely right or wrong. The tension between them remains unresolved, reflecting the broader uncertainty of the era in which the show was created. From a production standpoint, the series leaned increasingly into its own artificiality. Sets were not designed to convince but to suggest. Interiors felt slightly too spacious, props slightly too exaggerated. This subtle stylization reinforced the sense that Hooterville was not a place on a map, but a mental space where ordinary rules no longer applied. The show was not about rural America, but about displacement itself. The decision to let characters occasionally acknowledge the audience further destabilized traditional narrative boundaries. These moments were not frequent, but when they occurred, they were handled with calm indifference. No character reacted with surprise to the breach. This treatment suggested that even the fourth wall was subject to the same casual disregard as logic or continuity. Reality in Green Acres was flexible. The writing relied heavily on language as a tool of absurdity. Conversations often unfolded with impeccable grammar and confidence, even when discussing nonsensical subjects. This linguistic precision made the content more unsettling and, paradoxically, more believable within the show's internal logic. The humor arose not from foolish speech, but from intelligent language applied to irrational situations. Timing remained one of the series' most powerful instruments. Jokes were rarely rushed. A line would land, followed by a pause long enough for the meaning to settle. This deliberate pacing trusted the audience to think, to recognize the contradiction, and to arrive at amusement independently. It was a style closer to stage comedy than television, and it gave the show a distinctive cadence. The animal characters, particularly the farm animals, were treated not as background elements but as quiet disruptors. They behaved according to their own rhythms, often undermining Oliver's plans without malice. Their presence reinforced the theme that nature does not negotiate. It exists on its own terms, unaffected by human expectations or schedules. As the series progressed, it became clear that Oliver's dream of rural purity was as artificial as Lisa's fantasy of urban glamour. Both ideals collapsed under scrutiny. The city he left behind is never shown as a place of genuine fulfillment, and the farm he embraces offers no enlightenment. The show suggests that dissatisfaction is not rooted in place, but in the human tendency to believe that change of scenery equals change of self. This insight resonated strongly during the mid-1960s, a period defined by social transition and uncertainty. Audiences were grappling with shifting values, questioning institutions, and redefining success. Green Acres mirrored this unease through humor, presenting a world where certainty was constantly undermined, yet never replaced with despair. The absurdity was gentle, not cruel. Critics at the time often struggled to categorize the show. It did not conform to the sentimental tone of earlier family comedies, nor did it embrace outright parody. Its intelligence was understated, its commentary indirect. This ambiguity may have limited its immediate critical recognition, but it also allowed the series to age with unusual grace. The absence of moral instruction is particularly striking. Episodes do not conclude with lessons learned or characters transformed. Oliver does not grow wiser, nor does Lisa abandon her illusions. Instead, the series insists that life continues without resolution. This refusal to instruct places the viewer in an active role, inviting interpretation rather than delivering conclusions. Visually, the show maintained a consistency that reinforced its themes. Bright lighting and clean compositions contrasted with the disorder of events. This visual clarity made the narrative chaos more pronounced. Nothing looked wrong, yet nothing functioned as expected. The contradiction was intentional and central to the show's identity. The humor of Green Acres also depended heavily on restraint. Performances avoided exaggeration, even when situations were absurd. This restraint grounded the comedy, allowing the premise to remain credible within its own world. The actors played their roles with sincerity, never signaling that they were aware of the joke. That sincerity is what made the absurdity resonate. Over time, the series revealed itself as a study in persistence. Oliver persists in trying to fix what cannot be fixed. Lisa persists in celebrating what others dismiss. The town persists in being exactly what it is. No one wins, no one loses. The balance remains intact, and that balance becomes the show's quiet resolution. Seen through this lens, Green Acres is less about rural life and more about the human relationship with expectation. It explores what happens when ideals collide with reality and refuse to yield. The laughter comes not from mockery but from recognition. The situations may be exaggerated, but the emotional truth beneath them is unmistakably real. As viewers continue watching, they are not drawn forward by suspense, but by familiarity. The pleasure lies in returning to a world where unpredictability is the only constant. That consistency of inconsistency is what gives the series its lasting comfort. As Green Acres moved deeper into its run, its comedy began to feel less like a collection of rural mishaps and more like a carefully maintained dream logic, one that the series protected with remarkable discipline. The town of Hooterville did not simply contain odd people and odd customs. It operated as a realm where modern assumptions were gently dismantled, not through argument but through cheerful indifference. The longer Oliver stayed, the clearer it became that the show was not asking whether he could adapt. It was asking whether adaptation, as he understood it, was even a coherent goal. The most quietly fascinating element is that Oliver's problem is not the farm. It is his belief that life should respond to planning. He approaches the countryside like a project. Assess, organize, repair, improve. Yet every time he takes a rational step forward, the environment answers with a sideways shrug. Tools fail, services vanish, promises evaporate, and the social rules he relies on simply do not apply. This is not hostility. It is something more unsettling, a universe that refuses to validate his worldview. Hooterville's citizens, meanwhile, are not portrayed as victims of backwardness. They are remarkably self-possessed. Their calm is almost philosophical. When something absurd happens, they accept it as naturally as weather. This acceptance turns them into a kind of chorus, one that never explains the joke because to them there is no joke. Their reality is not a comedic distortion. It is the standard by which Oliver is judged, and he always falls short. The show's humor grows sharper precisely because it never announces its cleverness. It does not wink at the audience to say, "Look how strange these people are." It simply observes. In that observation, Green Acres becomes a satire of certainty itself. Oliver is certain the city represents progress, that systems create stability, that hard work produces predictable outcomes. Hooterville answers with a world where outcomes are improvisations, and certainty is a fragile performance. Lisa's role becomes even more essential in this phase, because she functions as the only character who intuitively understands the rules of this universe. You do not conquer it, you harmonize with it, or you transform it into a stage for your own imagination. Her elegance is not simply a visual gag. It is a philosophy. She refuses to treat the farm as a punishment or a compromise. She turns it into her personal theater, where glamour is not incompatible with barnyard realities, but simply coexisting in glorious contradiction. This is why her presence never feels like a defeat. In a lesser comedy, Lisa would be forced to learn humility, to trade beauty for practicality. Green Acres rejects that moralizing impulse. Lisa does not become a farm wife in the conventional sense, and the show does not frame her as wrong for refusing to do so. Instead, it presents her as someone who understands that identity can be preserved through style, ritual, and the simple refusal to surrender. The marriage at the center of the series remains one of classic television's most unusual partnerships. They are mismatched yet not enemies. Their disagreements are real but rarely cruel. Oliver's frustration is often sincere, but it is not contempt. Lisa's whimsy is often impractical, but it is not sabotage. Their relationship becomes a portrait of two people clinging to different definitions of a good life, each believing that the other is overlooking something vital. The show never resolves this tension because it is not a problem to be solved, it is the human condition rendered in comedy. As the writing grew bolder, the series continued to play with form in ways that were quietly radical for its time. It bent continuity without apology. It allowed characters to treat impossible events as ordinary. It made room for moments where the viewer becomes aware of the constructed nature of television, yet the show does not collapse into parody. Instead, it uses those breaches to reinforce its theme, that the rules are arbitrary and that reality, whether rural or urban, is partly a story we agree to believe. What is especially striking is how often the show uses politeness as a comedic weapon. Conversations remain courteous even when nothing makes sense. People offer help while providing confusion. They answer questions with confidence and complete sincerity, even when their answers contradict basic logic. This creates a uniquely elegant kind of absurdity, one rooted in social ritual. The surface remains smooth while meaning falls apart underneath. Visually, the series continues to present Hooterville as bright and inviting, not eerie. This is important. The town is not a nightmare. It is cheerful. The sunlight is steady, the compositions are clean, the atmosphere feels almost wholesome. The absurdity is therefore disarming. It suggests that the breakdown of logic does not require darkness or menace. It can happen in broad daylight, accompanied by friendly smiles and perfectly ordinary manners. The performances remain essential to sustaining this tone. The actors play their scenes with sincerity, allowing the lines to land without exaggeration. They do not lean into farce. They treat nonsense as fact. This approach preserves the show's dignity and prevents it from becoming shrill. It also allows the audience to laugh without feeling pushed. The humor arrives as a realization, not as an instruction. Over time, Oliver's struggle becomes less about farming and more about belonging. He wants to be taken seriously in a world that does not define seriousness the way he does. He wants recognition for effort in a place that does not worship efficiency. He wants to be competent in an environment that treats competence as optional. His frustration is therefore oddly moving. It is comedic, certainly, but it also contains a quiet ache familiar to anyone who has ever felt out of place, no matter how capable they are. This is where Green Acres reveals its deeper emotional resonance. Beneath the jokes lies a gentle truth. Sometimes the world does not respond to us the way we think it should, and the more we fight for validation, the more isolated we become. Lisa avoids that isolation because she does not demand validation. She creates meaning as she goes. The town avoids it because it has never needed the outside world to confirm its logic. Oliver alone carries the burden of needing reality to behave correctly. And yet, the show never punishes him harshly. It does not crush him. It simply keeps him in motion, forever trying, forever adjusting, forever astonished. There is a strange comfort in that repetition. It implies that dissatisfaction can be lived with, that frustration can be survived, and that dignity is not always found in victory, sometimes it is found in persistence. By this stage, Green Acres has fully established its signature. A world that does not change to accommodate the protagonist, and a protagonist who cannot stop believing it will. That ongoing collision produces laughter, but also an unexpectedly reflective mood. The viewer begins to understand that the series is not ridiculing Oliver's dream. It is examining the cost of believing that a new setting will solve an old restlessness. In that sense, the show becomes a quiet parable about modern life, about the hunger for reinvention, the longing for simplicity, and the way both desires can become fantasies. The farm is not the answer, and the city was never the answer either. The answer, if there is one, lies in the uneasy art of living with contradiction. As Green Acres approaches its later chapters, the series arrives at a form of quiet completion without ever seeking closure. Nothing is resolved, nothing is corrected, and nothing truly changes, and that is precisely the point. By this stage, the show has fully committed to its worldview, that life does not reward effort with clarity, nor does it punish absurdity with consequences. It simply continues, shaped less by intention than by temperament. Oliver Douglas remains firmly convinced that persistence will eventually be rewarded. His belief is no longer naive but stubbornly hopeful. He continues to repair, reorganize, and appeal to systems that do not exist. What makes this poignant rather than merely comic is that the series never suggests he is foolish for trying. His struggle is treated with dignity. The world may not respond, but his effort still matters, if only as an expression of who he is. Lisa, meanwhile, seems entirely at peace. She has not won in any conventional sense, but she has adapted without compromise. Her joy does not depend on outcomes. She finds meaning in performance, beauty, and imagination. The farm has not diminished her identity, it has become another setting in which she can express it. In a show so focused on misplaced certainty, Lisa emerges as the only character who truly understands how to live without it. The town of Hooterville remains unchanged, serene in its internal logic. Its residents do not learn lessons, nor do they experience growth arcs. They are complete as they are. This refusal to evolve is often mistaken for simplicity, but it is, in fact, a statement of confidence. The town does not aspire to become something else. It exists comfortably outside the pressures of improvement and ambition, and in doing so, it exposes the anxiety that often underlies those pursuits. What becomes increasingly clear is that Green Acres is not about rural life versus urban life. It is about expectation versus acceptance. Oliver expects life to make sense. Lisa accepts that it may not. The town neither expects nor questions. This triangular tension sustains the series to its end, providing a structure more durable than any plotline. The show's visual consistency reinforces this philosophy. The farm never becomes more efficient. The surroundings never grow more orderly. The lighting remains bright, the compositions clean, the world inviting. There is no visual punishment for chaos. Disorder does not produce decay. This is a subtle but powerful rejection of the idea that progress is visually or materially evident. Things do not get better or worse. They simply remain. In this final movement of the series' identity, the humor becomes almost meditative. Laughter arises not from surprise, but from recognition. Viewers no longer wait to see what will go wrong. They understand that things will not align, and they find comfort in that inevitability. The comedy no longer pushes forward. It circles gently, returning again and again to the same unresolved truths. This circularity gives the show its emotional warmth. There is no pressure to arrive anywhere. Watching Green Acres becomes less about anticipation and more about presence. Each episode exists for its own sake, unburdened by continuity or consequence. This quality makes the series especially resonant for a mature audience, one that understands that not all stories or lives move toward clear conclusions. The series' use of absurdity never turns cruel. Oliver is frustrated but never humiliated. Lisa is whimsical but never dismissed. The townspeople are strange but never ridiculed. The humor maintains a gentleness that protects its characters from cynicism. Even at its most illogical, the show remains humane. As the television landscape began to change toward the end of the decade, Green Acres stood as an artifact of a different sensibility. It resisted the growing demand for relevance, realism, and topical urgency. Instead, it remained committed to timelessness. Its world was not a reflection of current events, but of perennial human impulses, the desire to escape, to improve, to belong, and to be understood. In retrospect, the series feels almost philosophical. It suggests that the search for meaning through location, occupation, or structure is often misguided. Meaning, it implies, is less about where one lives and more about how one responds to uncertainty. Oliver responds with effort. Lisa responds with imagination. The town responds with indifference. None of these responses are condemned. This is why the series ends not with resolution but with continuity. Life in Hooterville goes on exactly as before. Oliver continues to try. Lisa continues to dream. The town continues to function according to rules that make sense only to itself. The absence of transformation is not a failure of storytelling, but its fulfillment. For viewers revisiting Green Acres today, the experience carries a quiet reassurance. It offers permission to stop searching for neat answers. It suggests that confusion does not require correction, and that frustration does not invalidate effort. There is dignity in trying, beauty in imagining, and comfort in accepting that the world may never fully cooperate. The series' enduring appeal lies in its refusal to judge. It does not tell the audience how to live. It simply presents different ways of coping with a reality that resists control. In doing so, it creates space for reflection rather than instruction. The laughter it provokes is thoughtful, not dismissive. Ultimately, Green Acres stands as one of classic television's most understated achievements. Beneath its eccentric humor lies a remarkably composed vision of life's contradictions. It acknowledges the human longing for order while gently demonstrating its futility. It celebrates imagination without pretending it solves anything. It allows chaos to exist without punishment. To rediscover the series is to step into a world where expectations loosen and patience is rewarded. Its charm is not in clever twists or dramatic turns, but in its calm persistence. It reminds us that some of the most enduring stories are those that do not insist on progress, but instead offer companionship in uncertainty. In that quiet companionship lies the true legacy of Green Acres. It does not promise answers. It offers recognition. And for those willing to listen carefully, it delivers a rare and lasting comfort. The understanding that life's refusal to make sense is not a failure, but a condition, and one that can be met with humor, grace, and a gently raised eyebrow.